Hi all, so welcome to this channel, and in today's video session I'll discuss SQL trigger concept in IBM DB2. So let's start. So first thing is it tracks the database activity. So if any event occurs like update, insert or delete occurs onto the database tables or views, then a trigger gets fired, and so basically it tracks whatever the activity which is happening on the database. So if that activity happened, then only a trigger gets fired. So basically it applies on insert, update or delete. Now it enforces the business rules. So enforces the business rules means uh, let's say we have n number of tables in our and base, and they are correlated with each other, and if we have done any specific change to one table, then whatever then the other tables which are associated with that must be updated or in sync, or in sync with them. We use the trigger concept, and they are applied to the database directly, and which does not so in this case the application programmer does not have to take care of such things, and the complex business rules are enforced from the database itself. So they basically updates all the other tables whatever have to be updated upon updating into the main table. So that's what happened. So for example, if an account gets added, a message has to be sent to the into the bank, and the message has to be sent to the user on a mail or on a message that your account has been added. So that can be achieved using the triggers. So when the record gets added to the main file of the account where a user have opened the account, the bank has opened the account of the user, then a trigger gets fired which basically performs several actions. So it would get fired, or the multiple triggers gets fired, and they actually perform the multiple actions, or a single trigger can perform the multiple actions as well. So this way we basically enforce the business rules, the complex business rules using the database only. Now the trigger concept. So whenever trigger gets fired, a certain set of actions gets executed. So that's what it is whenever on to the database, when insert, update or delete has to be happened or is happened. So insert, delete and update on table or view, yes. So the trigger can be associated with a table or a view when an insert, update or delete is happened. And the most important thing here is they call by the database, means whenever a certain operation occurs like insert, and we applied an insert trigger, so in that case what happened, the database manager in itself called the trigger. So you don't have to, or the application programmer don't have to worry to call this triggers. So they are basically called by the database manager whenever required, whenever any changes or whenever any activity occurs onto the table or the database. Ensure data consistency in database. So it ensure data consistency, yeah, sure. So if we have updated one table, and on a certain event like insert onto the one table, other tables have to be updated, trigger gets associated with the main table and they get fired, and they will update the multiple tables accordingly. So the data must be consistent in the whole database using the trigger concept. Perform non-database operations. So as I told earlier also, that it can perform the non-database operations, non-SQL operations as well, like sending the messages or sending the emails and other things as well. Triggers cascading concept is also there. So let's say there are two tables, table 1 and table 2, and I actually apply two triggers. Let's say on table 1 there is a trigger 1, and on table 2 there is a trigger 2, and both the triggers gets activated once the record gets inserted into them. So that's an insert trigger. So let's say I have inserted the record in one table, then that insert operation activated the trigger 1, then that trigger 1 in itself update the table 2 record, or you can say insert the record into the table 2. So once the record gets inserted by the trigger 1 in table 2, then the trigger 2 associated with the trigger 1 gets with the table 2 gets activated, and then that gets fired. So basically this is called the triggers cascading, which is happening here. So it happens until the last trigger operation won't execute it. So there are two types of triggers, SQL or the external ones. For external trigger, you can search for external triggers in AS400 or IBM on the Google, and you'll find the videos which I uploaded on my channel. And for SQL triggers, I'll start uploading the videos on the SQL trigger concept one by one. So this is the concept one, then we'll move forward to the introduction and other things, and how we'll be basically doing the practically doing such things using the IBM. So I'll tell you that also in my next videos. So here you can see we can use the create or alter trigger to create trigger or alter trigger statement, SQL statements to create the triggers. So trigger can in itself call the stored procedure, which is an SQL or external or a SQL function, also UDF also. So they are basically fired by database manager on insert, update, delete operation. So this is already covered. Support column level granularity. So it means let's say we have 5 columns in a table, and I want that on once column 3 gets updated, then only I'll fire the trigger. Or a set of columns get updated, let's say column 1 and column 3 gets updated, then only I'll fire the trigger. So we can support the column granularity as well. So on the column level the triggers gets associated, and they will get executed or fired when that columns gets updated. Now instead of triggers not available for external triggers, so we have a functionality instead of triggers which could be applied to view in IBM DB2, and that basically skips the DML operation, database manipulation operation like insert, delete or update, and perform every other actions which is there in the trigger. So this is not available in the external trigger, but this is available in the SQL trigger. So we'll discuss this in detail in later videos. One trigger can process multiple events. Yes, sure, one trigger can process multiple events, and it is always of course sure its support is portable. So we can port this to the many different environments. So that's all in this trigger concept video. Thank you and have a nice time.